All right, your slide is up, Evan.
All righty, great, thank you. And if we're ready to rock and roll, I guess we'll let I'd ask Jessica to do a little bit of a introduction for us as to the where and why we got to where we are.
Great. Well, thank you, Evan, and just good afternoon. Hopefully we may get some more attendees joining us here, but if not, this is going to be saved on ODO's website for people to view as they are able. I'm Jessica Reichers. I manage the policy team here at the Oregon Department of Energy, and the development of the alternative school bus cost analysis tool that was Evan's fine work, and it is in my group that work has been done, and also the guidebook on electric school bus procurement and use was done through my team with work from Evan and one of our fabulous interns. Electric vehicles are a hot topic these days, whether it's choosing electric for your next personal vehicle purchase or thinking about how to convert your medium or heavy duty fleets. Everyone seems to be talking about it, and electric school buses are no different. Electric buses offer a lot of benefits. They're quieter, they have no tailpipe emissions, and they offer significant lifetime operational costs. You might have noticed that gasoline prices have jumped over 80 cents per gallon in the last year, and diesel by more than $1.10. And electricity is a cheaper alternative. It's a quarter to a third of the cost of gas or diesel per miles driven. And electric buses are cheaper to maintain because they have no engines that require fluid changes or parts that wear out and need replacement. But electric buses do currently have a higher upfront cost, which may be a barrier to school districts that are interested in the benefits of electric buses, but they need to operate on tight budgets. I'd also like to point out that when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, when you go electric, it's not just the emissions that are associated with that tailpipe, but also the emissions coming from the electricity that's generated to power that bus. And those life cycle emissions in the state of Oregon, no matter where you charge, are going to be lower than driving that diesel or gasoline bus. And to that end, the rural parts of the state that often use consumer-owned utilities to provide their electricity also have some of the cleanest energy in the state, can be upwards of 95% clean, even approaching 100%, depending on the time of year. And if you're interested in why that is, you can reach out to me after this. I'm happy to talk about it. And the other utilities that might have a few more emissions today are actively decarbonizing their infrastructure. So we anticipate that just by driving these buses, their emissions will get lower and lower as time goes on. So today I'm very pleased to be joined by my colleagues at the Oregon Department of Energy, as well as the Department of Environmental Quality and Department of Education, who all have some valuable insight and processes with their programs that they help address these upfront costs. And this is just the beginning. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that passed last year had $5 billion in funding for cleaner school buses. And just yesterday, the federal administration announced $32 million for diesel school bus replacements across 3 different programs at the federal level. And the information and the rollout of these funds is still not known, but all of us here at the state and on this webinar are watching it carefully. Today, all of my colleagues here are going to be providing you with information on the current funding streams that are available and what the qualifications for that funding are. But we're also watching for news on this federal funding, and we anticipate that there will be future opportunities to provide information and all of the expertise that you see here for all of you as more information is made available. And with that, I will hand it back to you, Evan.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to take just another minute or two with some housekeeping issues. One is welcome to part 1 of a 2-part webinar series on electric school buses. And today we're going to be talking about funding opportunities. However, a week from right now, we will have the part 2 that will be looking at some technical tools that are available. So welcome, and I'm also going to point out that we have planned for a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So unless you have something really urgent on a current slide, let's hold our questions until the Q&A. I also understand that if you just post something in the chat, you will not be automatically identified. So please identify yourself or your affiliation with any questions you post in there. And then at the end, like I say, we'll have more Q&A time. And a reminder that we're recording this session, so please contribute accordingly. I think anything else I should be talking about now, Casey? I guess not. I
think
guess
we're good to go. The chat is on the bottom right of your screen with a little bubble there, so you can activate that. You can also, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see there's a mute and share video button, and we'll turn those on and make those available during the end.
all righty. Well then, without further ado, I'm happy to welcome Brock Dittis, Operations and Policy Analyst and Acting Manager for the Pupil Transportation Unit at the Oregon Department of Education. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brock.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you, Evan. Thanks everybody else for joining today. Later in the presentation, we'll get to new funding opportunities, but I wanted to take some time to explain how school buses in general are funded. And there are really very few differences between how an electric school bus would be funded for a school district or other K through 12 school and any other bus in the state. So let's roll to the next slide. So every bus is provided reimbursement when it qualifies for use in a school district school operation. Reimbursable costs are those that are involved in home to school transportation on a daily basis for K through 12 schools, or any trip that is directly connected to the classroom. So that doesn't include sports trips, and it doesn't include all zoo trips or any sort of fun day events. But if someone is taking a class and that class involves a visit to a site that would involve a report or something like that, something the student gets a grade in, that would be included in the reimbursable expenses. So again, kind of essential school day transportation might be a way to sum it up. I've got on the slide here just kind of a description of the grant and how it operates. We start out with an estimate of membership and revenue, figuring out kind of based on what we know, what school districts will be owed for their qualified transportation expenses, and then it's reconciled with actual data and pupil transportation reporting. Every September, I pull in reports from pupil transportation operations around the state, and we analyze and review what they've sent us in terms of what the expenses were, any mileage that was reported that might not be reimbursable, as well as assets, including new ones, such as electric school buses and their charging infrastructure. So the largest grant in the state school fund is the transportation grant. As you can see, we've got the number listed at $235 million and about a half there from the 19 and 20 school year. Reimbursement is based on costs per average daily membership, and so that's the number of students that attend. And there's a formula and statute that I won't get into here, but if you are interested, you can contact me later. And I may, in fact, refer you to Adam Krein, who designed most of these slides, who is our state school fund specialist. The 70% reimbursement rate is largely what someone can expect, unless they are usually a small rural school district where the average daily membership is low enough that they qualify. I believe our 10 smallest districts will receive it's 20 smallest districts would receive the 90%, and then the next smallest from there would receive the 80%. But by and large, most districts in the state will be receiving 70% reimbursement. And what that means is that there's always a local investment. School bus fleets are comprised largely of state dollars, and so the state agency, Oregon Department of Education, takes an interest in everything, how they're maintained, whether they are suitable for the purpose, whether they meet all the applicable regulations. But there's always that 30% local investment. So you can see on this slide, there's the life cycle of the transportation grant. Like I mentioned, we reimburse. We don't pay for buses up front. If you run a fleet, that's going to be your responsibility to obtain and to pay for or finance up front the vehicles that you'll be bringing onto your fleet. However, what we do is we evaluate based on reporting how much is owed from the state school fund. And so you can see beginning in a previous year. This is based in 19 through 21. December of the previous year, we'd have kind of our preliminary estimate of what we expect. We would start paying based on the estimate over that next course of time, about that 6-month period from July to January. In February, we would update with all of the information we've received. Every September, we pull in reporting data, and so we are adjusting those estimates based on what we've learned about the fleet from reporting that's due in September of each year. And then the final grant payment, that's done towards the end of the next school year. As you can see on this graph, that's about May 2022. So next slide, please. The estimate of membership and revenue data collection, basically this is an idea of what you would see if you're the person working with finances at the school districts. And you can see the current year's, these are dummy numbers, of course, for demonstration, but you can see kind of what your current year's expenses would be, as well as the projected year. Next screen, please. This is a picture of the report. As you can see, this is for the Bandon School District, just kind of chosen at random. But when reporting is done each year, you can see that we have, first of all, the mileage. Mileage is a piece of the reimbursement. Sometimes school districts will fund reimbursable and non-reimbursable transportation together. That requires us to parse out which of those miles were reimbursable, which were not. So the first part of this form has to do with that. As you can see, there's a mileage rate that's calculated based on the size of the vehicle, and then the reduction of the reimbursement is calculated based on the mileage reported. The second part of this form includes the vehicles that are currently being depreciated. And what we require is that before a vehicle is depreciated, we have a two-step process that first of all registers the vehicle with our records, and then provides for the vehicle to be certified for its use. So if it's going to be used primarily for reimbursable purposes for that home to school transportation, then we'll have a certification of yes or a certification of no. This is going to be primarily a trip or a spare bus or something along those lines. So we base our records off of that reporting. Next slide, please. So a breakdown of the annual daily membership. So that's right. The top 20 districts with the highest costs per student receive the 90% reimbursement rate, next 20, 80%. And then at the time of these slides being built, it was 157 remaining districts. So again, the majority of Oregon school districts are going to receive that 70% reimbursement. Next slide, please. The transportation grant, like I mentioned, it's a big chunk of what's reported. You can see there's the overall financial audit data that comprises the payments from the state school fund to the district. The transportation reports do include a portion of that reimbursement. So you've got the garage depreciation. If there is a building that's built, those depreciate over a 25-year cycle. Bus depreciation, which is usually the largest number, vehicles depreciate over a 10-year cycle, and usually that's broken into 10 equal payments. It's worth mentioning here that there are a lot of, like we mentioned, opportunities for funding that have popped up for electric school bus. When the state school fund reimburses costs, we will reduce for the amount paid by any external funding. So we will reimburse, for example, on an electric school bus that is worth $400,000, for example. If you receive $100 in grant funding, then we would reimburse 70% of the remaining $300,000. So the non-reimbursable amounts and the eligible transportation expenditures are reconciled, and that's all added up to result in the number that the school receives from the state school fund each year. Next slide, please. Like I mentioned, capital improvements, bus garages, etc. We have those reported on an annual basis with the annual reporting to make sure that we know what is happening with your facilities. In most cases, facilities are reimbursable expenses as well, as long as the garage or the facility that transportation is run out of is dedicated 100% to transportation. So not split with maintenance or something along those lines. Next slide. This is a little bit into the weeds, and so I won't get into it, but funding, those of you who work in a school finance office will be familiar with the funding arrangement and the structures and how accounting is performed. We check to make sure everything is legitimate and checks out with those. Next slide, please. Like I mentioned, all the non-reimbursable miles, if anything was done that resulted in non-reimbursable. For example, if all the funding accounts for mileage that's done for home to school, but then the trip mileage for sports were mixed in with those, we do need to parse those out to make sure that the reimbursement amounts are accurate. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, anything non-reimbursable, and we can look into the details of that if you've got questions specifically about what is and is not. There's a pretty dense rule that deals with people transportation finance specifically. Next slide. We do want to make sure, like I mentioned again, that any grant improvements, anything that you've been paid from another source by, reduces the amount so that we basically don't double reimburse. We want to make sure that everything is identified as something that your school district would have to pay for. So again, if a grant pays for part of a bus purchase or part of a facility or something along those lines, we want to make sure we can reduce the amount and reimburse for the actual expenditures of your school. Next slide. So there are some links here. My understanding is that the presentation today will be shared, so you can follow those at your leisure once the presentation is shared with you. And I think my information may be on the next slide. Okay, so I've got Adam Krein from State School Fund. He's the State School Fund manager. I do recommend that you check in with him for many finance-specific questions, as he has more details on those than I do. However, I am intimately involved with the reporting process, and I do a lot of contact, a lot of question answering each year around September when those reports are due. So you've got my old format address that still reaches me. And then the bus license email address there is also our administrative team. So if you can't reach me, that will reach someone on our team. And with that, I'll pass it back to Evan and on to our next presenter, and I'll be around for Q&A at the end.
Thank you very much, Brock. Do we have anything that we need to address now, Casey?
Nope, I think we can continue.
We're all clear. Okay. Well, then it's my pleasure to next introduce Christy Spoon. She is our schools and program lead at the Department of Energy, and she's going to talk to us now about public purpose charges or the 1149. Some people still remember it by its bill number, 1149 funds. So welcome, Christy.
Okay, thank you, Evan. Okay, so you can go to the next slide, Evan. I'll just start off. I'm going to be talking about the Public Purpose Charge Schools program. And again, like Evan said, some people refer to it as the Senate Bill 1149 schools program, just because they seem to recall that original Senate bill. But I'm going to talk a little bit about what the public purpose charge is, who is eligible, and then I'll get into a little bit more specific detail about the funds towards electric school buses. So this first slide just gives you a little bit about the actual public purpose charge. It originally started the program started in 2002, but at the very beginning of the program, the charge was 3%. Now this is a public purpose charge on electric utility bills for customers in PGE and Pacific Power Territory. So again, it started quite a long time ago, and as you'll see on the slide, I mentioned effective January 1, 2022, just because there's been some changes. So I just kind of wanted to mention that briefly, that there's been some changes, but starting January of this year, the public purpose charge is now 1.5% on the electric bills for those customers in PGE and Pacific Power Territory. This is just a little pie chart of kind of how the funds are allocated with that 1.5%, but I'll be mostly focusing on the school district's portion, which is 20% of that fund or that charge. And the public purpose charge goes through January 1st, 2036. So we've got quite a few years left of those funds collecting. And next slide, Evan, please. Evan, can you go to oh, perfect. Okay, so this gives you a little bit about kind of who is eligible for the Public Purpose Charge Schools program. So the eligible school districts are going to be public K through 12 facilities or school districts in the PGE and Pacific Power Territory. So again, those customers that are paying into that public purpose charge are going to be those that are eligible. So again, we're first looking at the public K through 12 facilities. So the educational structures, elementary school, middle school, high schools, those kind of facilities. Currently, there are 111 eligible school districts in those territories that qualify for the program already. And the dollar amount or the percentage of those funds. So once those funds are all collected by the utilities, the school districts get that 20% back. Each school district gets a percentage back based on the schools, the facilities that are in that territory, and the student counts that are within those facilities. So we work with the Department of Education to get those updated numbers each year. So again, that's kind of giving a school district a percentage of that fund or that charge. Now, basically, the funds in this kind of chart off to the right-hand side basically gives you a little bit about what the funds can be used for. The first have to be used to complete energy audits within educational facilities or fleet audits of the eligible school districts. So that's kind of the new piece, is this fleet audit portion for school districts. Once those have been done, or some audit has been completed, then the school district can use the funds to do energy efficiency measures within those eligible facilities, or can use the funds to purchase zero emissions vehicles, which include buses. And then the last one on there is they can also use the funds to purchase electric vehicle chargers. A few additional things about the funds. These funds, the public purpose charge funds or Senate Bill 1149 funds, are distributed each month from the utility directly to the school district. Again, all based on that percentage that they get. So the districts would receive those funds and deposit it within their account, track it, and then once they've done something that is considered eligible for reimbursement, they communicate with Odo, and we work through the process so that they can then reimburse themselves, essentially. And each project, and I use project generally, so each project, whether it's an energy efficient measure or purchasing a vehicle or installing a charger, any one of those, again, once for each of those projects, we have what's called an 1149 maximum reimbursement amount. And that's just to kind of set, that's the maximum that we can approve for reimbursement out of the funds. And then again, kind of that last little piece is the funding is considered reimbursement. Even though it sounds a little funny, the districts get that money directly each month already. It is considered reimbursement, so they have to work with us to collect the data for final costs, make sure it's installed or completed, or like a bus that's on site and they're in use. Then we can follow up with the school district for that reimbursement amount. Next slide, Evan. Okay, so this is a little bit more specific to fleet audits and the electric vehicles and the charging. There's a couple different steps on our website, and again, I included the link mostly just because it's easier once you get through this. You guys can go check out the link on our website. First step is to complete that fleet audit. There's a spreadsheet out on our website, and just fill out the spreadsheet, submit it to Odo, and we'll review it. Again, the second step is to complete a form. There's a couple different options, but again, there's one form for electric vehicles, light duty vehicles with charging stations or chargers, or another form for electric school buses and chargers. Again, you'll fill out those forms and submit them to Odo for us to review. Next slide, Evan. Again, the last couple steps, Odo is going to be reviewing the forms. We communicate back and forth with the districts to make sure it's super clear and we've got all the information. We'll send kind of an email that kind of says that, again, we've reviewed it and it's eligible to move forward for purchase or whatever it may be, just so the district has some communication from Odo. And then the last step is once, again, that item has been purchased, installed, or at the school district, then that information for final cost documentation is submitted to Odo, and then we'll follow up with again, kind of that final email saying again that you're now eligible to reimburse yourself, even though again, it's already at the district, you're just transferring the funds to where you need to move it out to. Next slide, Evan. And these are kind of the eligible amounts that could be approved up to, I guess, or the maximum amounts. Electric vehicle chargers for the level 1 and level 2 chargers. Again, we're covering the full cost. Again, all of this being said, there's a little note at the bottom, up to 100% of the cost minus any other incentives or grants or any other funds that are contributed besides just district funds. And DC fast chargers, they do need to be reviewed by Odo, but you would just submit that information to Odo and we'll review it. And then there's some different costs here. So again, for electric school buses, I included all of this, but electric school buses are just based on the type of bus. So type A buses can be approved up to 250,000. And again, type C and D are up to 300,000. Now, part of this, I just want to reiterate, each school district is going to be eligible for a portion of these funds. So smaller districts, because their student counts, because their facilities, they have less facilities, they don't get as much of these funds. So even if we look at how much we think they're going to get to the end of the program, to that 2036 date, some districts may not ever even receive 250,000 of 1149 funds. So while we say we can approve up to that amount, it's all based on the specific district's funds, where they're at, and anything related to that. So again, we can help review that information to make sure that the school district has an understanding of how much we think they might get before they move forward. And I would always encourage anybody in the transportation or anybody looking at this to talk to the business managers at the district, facility managers, transportation managers. All of you guys get together to kind of talk through it and just see if these funds had already been allocated, or maybe in some cases they've already been spent, even up to the future funds. So just kind of talk internally first and then reach out to Odo, and we can kind of go through the district specific amounts. Next slide. Okay, so this slide, we just wanted to include kind of just a list of a bunch of schools, kind of webinars, outreach, events, anything like that. The first one, obviously, is this particular webinar. The next one is the Public Purpose Charge Schools Program. We're going to be doing an outreach webinar actually tomorrow. And it's just to go through a little bit more specific details about those public purpose charge funds and some processes through that program. So there's a couple additional, again, the second part of this school bus electrification is on there. And then we'll have a second one for schools outreach. But again, there's a couple conferences on there as well. We just wanted to provide this information for those that are coming back to this PowerPoint or looking at things. So Oda is going to be reaching out to a couple different school districts and different events. Just wanted to kind of provide that for you. And I think that's it for me.
All righty, thank you very much, Christy. Now I don't see anything in the chat, so I'm gonna introduce our next speakers. We have both from the Department of Environmental Quality, Morgan Schaefer in the Air Quality Planning Programs, and Corianne Wind, who, among other things, leads up the Clean Fuels Program. And as I said, they're going to kind of tag team on us here. So welcome, Morgan and Corey.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. And then I think I will kick it off. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you fine.
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. So I will kick off this portion of the webinar for the DEQ related items. So just as an introduction, my name is Corianne Wind, and I manage the Oregon Clean Fuels Program. And here with me today is my colleague Morgan Schaefer, and she is with the Air Quality Planning section of DEQ. So what we'll be covering today are the DEQ, the programs that DEQ administers that are targeted at reducing emissions from vehicles, and that really pose to accelerate the transition to electric vehicles, and specifically here for today, the electric school buses. So we know that this transition can be costly and confusing, and so we want to let you all know that we are here to try and help it make it easier and less costly. So, okay, so this slide. So what I'm going to do is cover the Clean Fuels program first. And so the goal of the Clean Fuels program is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from or against transportation fuels. So what we're really targeting here is switching from gas or diesel to lower carbon options like biofuels, renewable natural gas and propane, or electricity in this case. So the Clean Fuels program operates on a credit system, which basically represents a ton of reduced greenhouse gas emissions, right, compared to the fossil fuel that it displaces. So providers of electricity for transportation generate these credits on a monthly basis. And when they report to us how much electricity is used in a vehicle, such as a passenger vehicle or a school bus. So then the provider of the electricity can sell these credits and use the revenue to invest in more electrification, such as more vehicles or for chargers as well. So there are 3 different kinds of credits that occur in the Clean Fuels program. So first here listed is the base credits, and the base credits are based on the carbon content of the electricity that you get from your utility. So, if you're in PGE territory, they have, a slate of different sources of where they get their electricity from, and so all of the users kind of have shared that slate with their customers. It does vary from utility to utility, and so that can be changed. So second of all is called these incremental credits. And this happens if the electricity that you're using is all renewable, right? We are encouraging renewable electricity here. And so if it's renewable, you actually get more credits than you would if you were just using the electricity given to you by your utility. And then the third option here is we call it advanced credits. And this is a way, and this is a process that is new to the agency where you need to apply to DEQ and then get an upfront loan for up to 6 years worth of credits. And then you pay it back over a period of time. So we reserve this option for transit agencies and for school districts. So you are in luck that this provision is eligible to you. It's basically, it serves as a much quicker way to generate a lot of credits at the beginning of a project than having to wait until later in the project. And then you can use the revenue from these credits to offset or to, for new costs that are associated with switching to the electric school buses. So on an individual vehicle level, the thing is that the rate of credit generation may be pretty slow. And so, if you have to wait quarter by quarter to kind of generate these credits, it may take you a long time to get to a point where it's actually worth it to sell and then, to use for your projects. And so we're really trying to seek ways to accelerate that process. Okay, next slide, Evan. So what I want to do here then is focus in a little bit more on these advanced credits. Like I mentioned, this is a new piece addition to the program. We actually haven't opened up the application process for this yet, but we will be doing it soon. So what is shown here is basically in that first line, it's like the base credits that I just mentioned, that the base credits get generated on a quarter by quarter basis. And so, it does take time for you to get enough credits generated to be able to sell. What we're trying to do in this advanced crediting is what will happen is that if you're interested in this, so you would apply to DEQ, the agency, and we would work with you to forecast what your future use of electricity is going to be. So we can do that by estimating the number of miles that you're going to travel or the amount of electricity that is anticipated to be used. And what we do with those numbers is then to translate those into credits. And so up to 6 years worth of credits, we can actually give it to you up front, right? So instead of waiting 6 years for this, we'll give it all to you up front. And then you can go and sell those credits. And so what happens then is that once you have that new electric vehicle in place, then on a quarterly basis, you still submit reports to us. So instead of generating new credits, what you're doing is paying down that initial loan. So you pay the loan back on a quarterly basis. Once those credits are paid back, then you jump back into generating new credits, right? But what this really serves to do is just, again, accelerate when you can sell those credits, how many credits you get, and really generate the kind of revenue that you need to be able to make more decisions about buying more electric buses, putting in the chargers that you need to support those buses. Do you need to make changes to your shop to be able to accommodate this? Do you need to train your maintenance staff to be able to maintain electric bus instead of a diesel bus? Those kinds of things. And so, like I said, so this is a new provision, and we should be opening up the application process for that soon, I would say in the April or May kind of period. So check back with us to if you are interested in something like this. Okay, so I am now going to turn it over to my colleague Morgan, and she's going to cover some of the other programs that DEQ has to help you make this transition. Morgan?
So much, Corey. So you've heard from a couple of options so far about how to finance your electric bus, both what the Department of Education provides, what the Department of Energy can help with for infrastructure, and then also the CFP program for a vehicle. There are a few other opportunities that we just wanted to make sure that you were aware of. These buses are incredibly expensive, and so you can't possibly know how to navigate all the different parts and all the different potential ways to get funds in order to support this transition. So I'm just going to go over a few of these because they're all included in the guidebook from Odo. For more information, please look there. It's a wealth of information for you. So there are a number of federal grant opportunities. The EPA has had the DERA program in place for a really long time, since the 1990s, I believe, in order to reduce diesel emissions. And they have now two different types of grants. One is to just transition older diesel vehicles to either newer diesel or other alternative fuels. And now they also have a specific pot of money to help transition vehicles exclusively to electric. So last year was the first time we saw this, and there were a number of buses that got awarded, and they paid up to $300,000 for the electric buses. No one in our state received those funds or applied, but hopefully we can change that around this year. So when those are actually happening is still a little bit up in the air because they're so new and there have been so many shifts on the federal side that we're just sort of watching and waiting. And as soon as we know, we'll make sure to share that information, especially out to all the districts. Other types of funding that you might be eligible for come through DEQ. So DEQ has diesel emissions